Hi, everyone, and welcome to Pathways to Equity here with LinkedIn. I'm Andrew McCaskill, Senior Director of Communications here at LinkedIn and a LinkedIn career expert. And I'm tuning in from Atlanta, Georgia. I'd love to hear where everybody else is tuning in from. So drop in the chat your name, where you're tuning in from, your location, and just throw it in the chat. We're super excited to be here to talk to you today. And here's why we're here. In 2020, we committed to identifying and mitigating systemic inequality and unfair bias in our products, recognizing that it was more than just an opportunity to do the right thing. It was really a core responsibility that comes along with having a global platform, and particularly one as ubiquitous as LinkedIn. Together, we can help ensure that when two people have comparable skills and similar experience are looking for a job, that they'll have the same opportunities regardless of their demographics. Think about that. Two people that have the same skill set and have the same background, they should have comparable outcomes. We're committed to this. We're committed to the journey, and we're continuing to take steps toward helping to drive more equitable outcomes for everyone, for all professionals. What does that look like? First off, we reimagine how we use data to build products with equity as a priority. Think about that. Imagine building equity into our systems at inception. Our product teams are have focused efforts on launching products and programming designed not only to promote equity, but to also shine a light on members of underrepresented communities. We're doing that with things like products like name pronunciation on our platform, new job titles, and gender pronouns, just to name a few. Our engineering teams have committed to designing and updating the AI that powers LinkedIn to spot potential bias, and we've open sourced all of that technology and all of that learning and made it accessible so that other folks can take that information and do the same thing too. And that's why we're gathered here today. You're going to hear from our engineers and our product managers about how LinkedIn is tactically achieving our commitment to equity, inclusion, and belonging, and how we're doing it through specific technical projects. All these projects are across different organizations, and hopefully you'll learn about our vision and this exciting journey that we have ahead of us. The reality is that while we've done a lot towards this, we're really just getting started. So, at the bottom of the screen, we got a bunch of reactions down there. We want to know what hits home for you today. What is interesting, what you find insightful, but quick reminder, this is a safe space. So only words of encouragement and support are welcomed here in this environment. With that, I'm gonna kick it off and ask you all to drop some love in the chat. Again, tell us where you are, and I would love for you to help me welcome one of my amazing colleagues, Imani Dunbar. Imani heads up our equity strategy here at LinkedIn, and she's doing some of the coolest work inside a company that's doing a ton of cool work. So, Imani, welcome.
Hey, Drew. Thank you for that fantastic kickoff. Like I said, I dig your energy. I always dig your energy. In case y'all are wondering, is this guy always this high energy? Yes, he is. He exudes passion. He exudes energy. He loves what he does, and it's great to be around him. Welcome all to this event. I do want to first start by acknowledging that these have been very, very difficult times for many of us the past year. So the fact that we could all come together and talk through something so meaningful and impactful, I want to have an expression of gratitude for. I also want to take a moment just to acknowledge folks who might not be as fortunate to join us today, and just keep them in our thoughts. So I want to talk a little bit about our equity strategy as a whole. So as Drew mentioned, I head up equity strategy for LinkedIn. And I want to talk a little bit about how we are thinking about equity. And I feel like, and many of you may feel the same, equity kind of feels like this ubiquitous term, but also very nebulous. And so I want to start with maybe a little bit of a visual to at least talk through how we think about equity and inequality on a broader scale. And so I think most folks probably have an appreciation for this notion that systemic barriers exist that create unequal starting points. Therefore, equal access to tools won't necessarily yield equitable outcomes. And all that to say that in order to actually help realize and drive equitable outcomes, the root causes of inequity must be addressed. And that's really what our equity vision is about. It's helping make sure that we are both creating equal access to opportunity and helping drive equitable outcomes. All right, so a little bit of a primer into how we're thinking about kind of equity here at LinkedIn, and wanted to juxtapose that along with equality just because of, again, kind of the ubiquitous but nebulous nature in terms of how folks are thinking about and talking about equity. So that's our current thinking. Now, to actually address our equity strategy, we're thinking about it in a couple of different angles. 1 for companies, 2 for members, and 3 for our employees. So for our companies, of which there's about close to 60 million on our platform, we want to make sure that we are creating and building products and features that are helping them identify, recruit, hire, retain top diverse talent. For our members, of which there's about 760 million, we want to make sure that we're identifying and mitigating bias that might exist on the platform. We want to make sure that they're having safe and trusted experiences where they feel like they belong. And we want to make sure our platform is a place where they can come and help achieve their objectives, whatever they may be. Find a job, grow their network, stay informed, engage in community. And from an employee perspective, we want to make sure that we're creating a place where our employees feel a sense of belonging. Now, in order to tackle kind of this grand equity strategy that we've laid out, there are a couple of things that we need to get right and do from a foundational perspective. And that's what we're going to spend most of the time talking about today when we get some of the remaining panel members to come up and speak. But I want to give a couple of highlights before we get into that. And there's 3 things I want to call out from a foundational perspective. 1, in order for us to realize our equity goals, we have to have a good understanding of the experiences that members are having on our platform. And a key way that we can do that is through self-ID, and we're going to talk a bit more about that. In addition to helping to understand the experiences of members on our platform and helping to inform products and features we should and could be building, this also becomes an important component in making sure we can measure outcomes, right? So I want to focus on I want to highlight the importance of that from a foundational perspective. The next thing is this notion of designing and building products. So how are we doing that with equity in mind? Drew talked about in the kickoff, making sure that equity is something that is embedded kind of in the DNA of everything that we do, and making sure that it's a shared responsibility across our engineering team, across product managers, across all members of the company. So how does it actually look and feel, and what's our approach to making sure that we are designing and building products with equity in mind? And then I think the last thing I'll call out, and I actually said it as part of the first piece, but I do want to make sure, because it is so very important, this notion of our ability to actually measure outcomes. And again, that's linked to a couple of the components we'll talk about, most notably of which is self-ID. So with that, thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to the discussion with our panel members, and I'm hoping that you enjoy the session and you can take a lot from it and maybe one day look to join the team. Drew, I think you are on mute.
That was not a pro move right there. Thanks, Amini. I always get super excited whenever you talk about all of the things that equity actually entails, other than just looking for a job, like all the things that people come to our platform for. Some people are coming for community, some people are coming for job opportunities, but there are a lot of people who are coming for all kinds of opportunities. So I really love hearing you when you say that and break that down for all of the ways that we can have more equitable experiences, not only on our platform, but just as economics is broadened by all the things that people can do when they come to LinkedIn. So before we, Amini, just so you know, Amini is absolutely coming back and is going to be coming back and talking to us with our panel a little bit later. And we're now going to bring up Ada Yu and DTK, Daniel Tweed Kent, or DTK as we call him internally, to bring some shape to our foundational approach. I mean, said this already. We got 700. We got more than 760 members and more than 50 million customers. Product is the intersection that can bring those incredible forces together. And so, DTK, Ada, welcome to the conversation. And DTK, why don't you start off? Tell us a little bit about why you decided to join LinkedIn and what's one of the things you're most excited about for the year to come. Ada, I'm going to ask you to do the exact same when he's done.
Awesome. Thanks, Drew. Really honored to be here. I joined LinkedIn 5 years ago, and I'll be honest, I wasn't actually a really active user at the time. I had heard about LinkedIn. I thought it was a really cool company. What really transformed my opinion of LinkedIn was when I heard Jeff Weiner, our previous CEO, talk about how he was mapping the digital economy. So I'll talk about a little bit what that means, and I would encourage you guys to go watch that speech from 2010. So it's the idea that LinkedIn is creating a place where all members can come and sign up in the professional world. They can share their skills, their schools. We can have millions of jobs, and then we enable a platform to connect those nodes in a way that creates opportunity. Whether it's the flow of knowledge, whether it's the flow of people and talent from one company to another, or whether it's insights that really push us forward. And so that's what inspired me initially to join. I was focused on learning and democratizing learning. And now I'm really excited about the equity work that we're doing at LinkedIn. And if I would have to call out one thing in particular, I would call out self-ID, which I'll be talking about a little bit more later in this session.
Ada, what about you?
I actually joined LinkedIn over 8 years ago for 2 reasons: the people and the mission. So I remember myself interviewing at LinkedIn, and every time I left an interview, I felt more energized than when I started. And this is really rare, but you can easily see why when you're surrounded by people like DTK, Drew, and Imani, each of them who bring so much passion to their work every day. The second reason I joined LinkedIn was really for the mission, the Students Initiative. So as you know, LinkedIn has so much data and information about professionals, where they went to school, what their first job was, to how they got to where they are in life. How do we use all of this information to help students make better decisions about where they should go to school, what they should major in, where they should get their first internship to get to where they aspire to be? And personally, as an immigrant and first-generation college graduate, I really found myself to be fortunate to have meandered my way into Silicon Valley. So the thought of being able to help millions of young professionals navigate their careers really resonated with me. And so the one thing I'm really excited about for the year to come is, so it's no surprise that the pandemic had a major impact on everyone. And as the world starts to recover from the pandemic, there is this phenomenon happening that our CEO has coined the Great Reshuffle. And what is happening is individuals are reflecting on truly what is important to them now that the line between work and life is more blurry than ever. And companies are really trying to figure out, what does the future of work look like? And what does it mean for them and their employees? And as we're all trying to figure this out, I see a huge opportunity for us as LinkedIn to help people find better jobs coming out of it. And I don't mean better just in the sense of a bigger title or more pay, but maybe a job that offers you more flexibility to spend more time with your family, or a company that aligns better with your values, or even something that just brings you more personal fulfillment. So in other words, I'm excited to help job seekers find opportunities where they will belong and can thrive. And that's really at the heart of what my team is responsible for: helping seekers find better jobs, helping companies hire qualified candidates, and making sure that's all happening equitably.
I love that. I can say, Ada, I feel you when you say that meandering your way to Silicon Valley. I'm a Black guy who grew up on a dirt road in Mississippi, so my path to tech jobs has been meandering is an understatement, but I love the fact that we are literally helping to democratize information so that some kid who lives on a dirt road in Mississippi now could find their way to Silicon Valley a lot faster and a lot easier based on being able to go to a place like LinkedIn. Amini talked a lot about this in the overview, the role product plays in our equity strategy, DTK. Can you give us just a little bit and expand on the role products plays?
Yeah, thanks, Drew. So Imani shared the scale at which LinkedIn operates, which I think is a really important thing to focus on. So north of 760 million members, 50 to 60 million businesses. That's a massive scale. And with that comes a lot of responsibility. And the role of, I guess one thing that we think about at LinkedIn is that products can change behavior and actually can change outcomes. And we need to play a critical role of looking at our experiences to make sure that we're delivering for every member of the global workforce. And product plays a critical role there. So I think of product as sort of the conductor of an orchestra. There's so many different functions that need to come together for us to swim in the same direction or play together in harmony. And product plays the role to set the vision and the strategy. And that means a leadership role as well to bring the team together. Product plays a critical role in communication and sort of holding accountability and expectations across the org. And a really important part is partnering with engineers, designers, user experience researchers on the R&D side, as well as our go-to-market team. So marketing and sales and how we think about bringing products to life. And so the product managers play a sort of central, integral role in all of those different parts of the experience. And then I would just call out in this equity work in particular, the stakeholders are even wider, where we're partnering really closely with our internal diversity, inclusion, and belonging team, talking to policy experts at LinkedIn and externally, and talking to a ton of both members and external experts to help inform the work that we're doing.
So much of the work that we're doing feels like uncharted territory for tech companies to really think about building equity into products and product roadmaps. I love that because we get a chance to still build something new inside of established companies. So Ada, can you just talk a little bit about how does your product roadmap support the equity strategy?
Yeah, Drew, good question. So it is all uncharted territory, and there's so much work to be done, and we know we can't do it all at once. But one of the things that we do know that is going to be impactful is we can make sure that our members have access to equitable opportunities throughout the hiring process. And our product roadmap in this area can be broken down into three main pillars. And Imani alluded to this earlier, but first, we want to start with building strong foundations where we define, measure, and mitigate existing biases in the hiring funnel. And so, as an example, a commonly quoted study says that a man will apply to a job when he's 60% qualified, but a woman will only apply when she's 100% qualified. And if this kind of behavior is left unchecked, what could happen is these users could start to see and apply to different kinds of jobs that are recommended to them despite having the same qualifications. And so we have taken steps to measure this impact and make sure that people with similar work experiences and comparable skills will see the same caliber of jobs across LinkedIn. And this is the kind of work we do across all of our products to make sure that we're measuring and mitigating unconscious bias. As a second pillar, our roadmap is really aimed at empowering our users to find opportunities where they will belong and thrive. And throughout LinkedIn, this happens in a variety of ways. So for example, we help our users showcase their authentic selves and personalities through our video cover story feature, for example. And we can help them acquire new skills and explore new career paths through our learning platform, our assessments product, and our Career Explorer tools. And of course, we help members engage with opportunities via their networks. We have this open to work feature where members can turn it on and tell their networks that they're open to opportunities. And it really helps mobilize the entire LinkedIn network to help. And then finally, as a third pillar, we help companies hire equitably by providing the right set of tools. As an example, we all know that candidates can be systematically overlooked because of snap judgments that are made about visual cues like gender, age, or ethnicity. And so we offer a feature to our recruiters where they can review candidate profiles without seeing names or photos. And so this feature really helps make sure that recruiters are focusing on what matters: skills, qualifications, and achievements. And so there is definitely a lot of exciting work ahead, and I welcome everyone to send me your thoughts, feedback, and ideas.
I love that. Name pronunciation is one of the things that I talk about all the time because it's such a big deal for me as I think about Andrew McCaskill's pretty easy, right? Like you see my name on a resume, you you can see it pretty easily. It makes a lot of sense to you. But I think about my niece and my cousin whose name is Krishanda, or my other cousin whose name is Chilimbwe, and think about how them being able to have name pronunciation on their profile gives them the opportunity to have the same outcome that I had when a recruiter says, oh, I'm going to talk to this person. I can now hear exactly how to pronounce their name. So I come to the table honoring them by being able to say, by saying their name correctly. And we give recruiters and people the opportunity and the skills to do that with a tool embedded in our profile and our platform. I love that. So DTK, when we're talking about all those things, how do we think about creating inclusive features? What does it even look like? And how do we figure out how to navigate our blind spots? Because face it, everybody has them.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and something that we spend a lot of time thinking and designing for in the way that we build products. So I think it first starts with us recruiting and building a really diverse team. Because I think that is essential for us to have a team that reflects the diversity of the community that we're building products and services for. Then I think it's on each of us to go on a learning journey to make sure that we're prepared to understand how bias might manifest in the way that we develop products, and for us to collaborate together to make sure that we're bringing together diverse perspectives. And when we talk about sort of product development in particular, I think one of the things that we spend time is around centering the member. And so what we mean by that is we really think about who are we designing for, and how can we learn directly from them of products or services that could actually improve their experience and deliver towards those outcomes. So I'll take one example, which is self-ID. So self-ID, which we mentioned earlier, is the ability for members to share their demographic information, whether that's race or gender or sexual orientation or veteran status and many other dimensions on LinkedIn. So we spent 6 months researching, talking deeply in focus groups with members to get feedback on how they think about the intersection of identity and work. What are the dimensions that matter most to them that they want to express? And we integrated that feedback into the design process. And we didn't stop there. We talked to our internal DIBS team. We identified external partners, both nonprofits and thought partners that can help sort of influence the decisions that we're making. And we integrated all that feedback into, the self-ID form, which we're excited to be relaunching in July. And it's the ability for, and we expanded it to 9 total dimensions. We have a flexible experience, and there's a bunch of additional features that we're going to add on to that experience over time. So that's how we think about sort of inclusive products. And then one additional thing that I would say in particular for equity is we spend time thinking about unintended consequences. It's very easy to think about, okay, what is the ideal outcome that you would have from this product that you're building? But oftentimes products and services have unintended consequences that lead individuals to have negative experiences. So we do something called a red team, blue team exercise, where we as ourselves think about, how would a bad actor or somebody who's trying to negatively use this information, how would they potentially cause harm to anyone in the platform? And we go through that mental exercise so that we're prepared, so that we can design in a way that mitigates any of that risk. So that's a little bit about how we think about inclusive design and product experience at LinkedIn.
I think that's so important, particularly the part about trying to think through what the unintended consequences might be, because I think that that's probably a lot of the trepidation and angst that folks will sometimes have from underrepresented groups. It's like, oh, if I self-ID, what are some unintended consequences? I love that we're really transparent about the fact that we're really thinking about that, being proactive in how we try to solve for that as well. Ada, how do you build and partner with engineering and design? I mean, and how is that experience unique at LinkedIn?
I think DTK mentioned it earlier, which is product managers are like conductors of an orchestra. And if you think about it, there's really no performance unless the orchestra is there. And this is similar. Without engine design, there really is no product. And so I think of my engine design partners as truly my partners in every sense of the word throughout the entire product development process. And so before the building even happens, engine design play a critical role in helping us crystallize and define what is this user problem that we're really trying to solve, and does it matter? And so I really appreciate that these are my strongest supporters and they bring different perspectives, right? But I also value that they're also my harshest critics in pushing the ideas and better. And so once we're bought into the problem, we actually work really closely together on now that we know this is the right problem, what do we want to build to solve this and how do we build it? And so overall is an extremely collaborative process throughout. And the question of why is this unique, I think is an interesting one because I think every company is unique. But in my mind, there are two necessary ingredients that makes this development process unique at LinkedIn and helps make LinkedIn successful at what we do. And so the first is really LinkedIn's powerful vision to create equitable economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. I think this vision really guides everything that we do on a daily basis and makes it easy for us at every level to know that we're making progress and impact in the right way. However, just having this powerful vision is not sufficient. The second ingredient that I think is unique here at LinkedIn is that we have a system that really empowers teams to act on this vision. And each person, regardless of your job function or your job title or your seniority, really has the support to what we call act like an owner and take steps to solve some of these problems and make progress towards our vision. And so I think it's really a combination of these product teams, which includes engineering and design and a variety of other product partners like data scientists, business operations, user research, and a lot of more. It's really this combination of vision and empowered teams that make the development cycle at LinkedIn unique and successful.
When I hear you talk about that, it makes me also think about how engineers are kind of hardwired to think about outcomes too, and scientists are hardwired to think about outcomes. So it makes perfect sense that LinkedIn would have a really unique take on the fact that equal access to opportunity is not enough, but we should be thinking about the next level of that. In addition to equal access to opportunity, is equitable outcomes. And I just want to say thank you, DTK. Thank you, Ada. I love hearing about the huge role that LinkedIn is having and taking on in driving equitable outcomes, especially for our most underrepresented communities. And it's also interesting because our initiatives begin with improving our product experience. And we can't do that without our technical partners within engineering to operationalize this centralized work, right? And so if you're a part of an engineering team, give us a thumbs up in the chat so we know who all is here. And as you do that, I'm going to invite two additional folks to the conversation with us today on our Pathways to Equity. And those two folks are Guillaume Saint-Jacques and Kinjal Basu. Guillaume and Kinjal, welcome. Thanks for joining us and walking us through the next part of this panel and talking to us about engineering and what engineers think and what role engineers are playing in equity at LinkedIn. So I'd love for you, the two of you, to do the exact same thing that I asked Ada and DTK to do. And Guillaume, if you could start us off and just a similar question. Ground us in the role that engineering plays in equity strategy and why you're interested in excited about this work. And Kinjal, you do the same.
Yeah, definitely. So super happy to be here. Essentially, engineering is very important, and my particular job is really measurement, right? So my job is essentially to try and find areas where we might have inequity or differences and trying to find opportunities and ways to potentially mitigate. And so as a data scientist, this is a really interesting area. And what brought me to LinkedIn is really kind of just the mission, right? I mean, I've always been interested in equality. Even I think as a kid, I was always like, why do some people have little, some people have a lot? And that's something I could never really ignore. And that's what drove me to study economics, focus on inequality, and eventually come to LinkedIn. Because I really felt like this was the place where I could, one, with the data, understand it, and two, make a difference. So that's like that's why I'm here, and that's kind of what I'm focusing on, measurement. Angel?
Yeah, thanks, Guillaume, and thanks, Drew, for having me. Great pleasure to be here. So I'm currently the tech lead for the responsible AI part of things. So I work with different AI teams trying to build things in a more responsible way towards equity. And some of the things that I'm really passionate about and why kind of I joined LinkedIn, and it has been like about 5 years since I joined, is the huge amount of data and the huge responsibility that we have. So, being an AI practitioner or a person who deals with machine learning models, data is something that we hold near and dear to our heart. And that's something I'm very passionate about, that the kind of complex problems that we can work with every day, dealing from jobs, from the network ecosystem, from how people interact with our systems, and everything together, it brings a very different kind of network or different kind of systems that most other data companies do not have. And that's why I came to LinkedIn. And throughout the 5 years, I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome, awesome. Listen, I would love for you, maybe Guillaume, if you could start. We all know that there's no immediate fix to solve for systemic inequalities, right? But could you two share some of the complexities of the problem and how it differs, how equity problems differ from some of our standard engineering problems?
Yeah, and since I'm talking to fellow engineers here, at least in the audience, I also mentioned that what makes it complex is also what makes it interesting and sometimes even fun to work on. And really, these are projects where there's no single goal, right? So I think as engineers, a lot of us sometimes feel like, oh, don't necessarily want to work on a project where it's just about creating more clicks, creating more engagement, and just kind of going towards this one place. And so when you think about equity, well, it's the opposite, right? I mean, essentially, we want to make sure that different people with different experiences, different demographics, have good experiences. And then when you think about what matters in terms of being treated equitably, you quickly realize, well, the process matters. Right? So it's one thing that people get jobs kind of in similar rates, but you want to make sure that they're able to build a network. They're able to get endorsements, they're able to find mentors, getting referrals. And so because the process matters, and because we're not looking at just this one objective, I think that makes it very interesting. Another way to think about it, if you're more on the kind of statistics side of it, right, is I think it's easy to think of this idealized average member when you build some sort of product or feature. Oh well, this is I'm gonna create this, and the user will do X, right? And I think what you realize at LinkedIn, and especially if you're working in engineering or equity, is well, there's no the user. There's a lot of individuals with very different lived experiences who react to products and to experiences very differently. And so that's also what makes it very interesting. And finally, there's almost kind of this tension, right, as a data scientist, because on one end, you want to use data. Data is this amazing opportunity. We have, we are able to identify things. We have access to also to resumes and activity. But at the same time, using data means computing averages. And so it means essentially kind of sometimes erasing some individual differences because you're making groups and doing averages. And so there's this kind of very interesting tension between the data, the statistics, the averages, and these individual and intersectional experiences. And so all of that stretches you as an engineer or as a data scientist. It forces you to really think in new methodologies and new ways of thinking about the data. And Kinjal, I think, Kinjal also had many conversations about the different trade-offs that are coming up. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's several different trade-offs which kind of makes this problem even more complex. Whenever, let's say, we are trying to build a product, there are some kind of business metrics that are in place. And most often than not, these kind of equity metrics might be actually hampering the true business metrics. So how does that intersection or that tension be resolved appropriately? It makes the problem even more difficult. And there's another kind of a system or a tension here as well, which is thinking through more of a short-term versus a long-term goal. In many kinds of instances, we are trying to optimize for a very short-term objective. But equity as a whole is kind of a very long-term goal. So how do we balance the things together? And all of these things together kind of make the problem even more complex. And that's what also makes it very more interesting and challenging to be solved.
You got to imagine, too, that we spend so much time solving for the majority that part of equity is figuring out how to solve for the smaller sliver, solving for the minority almost, right? So I love the fact that it's already engineering, and now you're flipping the script on how you solve all these things. When you're approaching equity with data, and data across different disciplines, right? I'm curious, what tools are we creating and using to do that work?
Yeah, so I think I can take a stab at that. So engineering actually plays a very fundamental role in all of project equity. So let's say we start with a new feature that we want to build, right? So we start with an assessment of to try to understand how good the system currently is right now and what the current state looks like. If we do see that, hey, there might be some bias creeping in from somewhere, we try to mitigate it. And towards that, we're also developing algorithms on how we can do that. And finally, that's not enough. When we launch such systems, we try to make sure that we are continuously monitoring such systems to see whether other biases can creep in somehow. And all of these together, engineering plays a very concrete role in each of these individual concepts. So, for example, we are building tools for assessment. These tools are now spread across every engineering team that is planning or building products. We are building new algorithms that is also leveraged across every AI team that's building or leveraging models. And finally, we are monitoring these pipelines and visualizations to see the effect of these kind of things when we are actually productionizing them. And Guillaume, I think you've had some experience on dealing with this. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, just I guess one plug, I guess, for LinkedIn or something. What's also really cool if you're an engineer and you're working in equity is like we're building this stuff not just for ourselves, but we actually oftentimes open source it and we share it with the world, right? And so there's something like we're not here just kind of working, in kind of our corner, hush hush secretly, and it's really something that we're excited to share, to open source. And so there's really the sense that like you're doing something, yeah, it's going to help people, it's going to help LinkedIn, but hopefully it'll also help the broader community, other tech companies, and potentially even governments or scientists, right? Like leveraging the tools that we build. And so this kind of openness, right? This kind of open source spirit, right? Crossed with equity, I think as an engineer, as a data scientist, is something that makes it even like more exciting to work on.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit too about talk a little bit more about responsible design specifically?
Yeah. So responsible design here at LinkedIn, and especially more on the engineering side, starts with intent and impact. So if you think about it, that's how we are overall thinking. It's not just the intent of doing the right thing, but what's the impact that we are seeing from having such a system. So let's start with the intent side. That kind of involves a lot of things which are behind the curtain. So things that are happening before a product launch. We are trying to evaluate our training data to try to make sure that it's kind of appropriately balanced. When we are designing systems that are training these large-scale AI models, we are trying to do it in a very fair way. And not just that, we are reviewing these model performances before deployment. So we are trying to make sure that we are not unjustly favoring one group over another. And then we are also trying to change the products and change the algorithms, if need be, to empower every member. So that is the intent with which we are building any kind of product in our systems. But that's not enough. We need to show, or we need to see what kind of impact they are having. So we try to detect and monitor how people are actually behaving or interacting with these systems, right? We focus on the people and we focus on the actual outcomes. And it could be very well the case that even though we start with a good intent, the outcome is not the same. So we use that learning and cycle it back. So it's not just starting with an intent and seeing what's happening, but observing these outcomes and then appropriately changing our systems to try to make the things overall a lot better. And all of these together fall under responsible design. So, and more often I want to call out the fact that these things are not just tied to the small teams that are working on any project that is titled Project Equity. It's more or less every team that's, even if you're not working on Project Equity, this is the kind of motivation or this is the kind of ideas that we are trying to put into place so that every product or every AI system that is being developed goes through the same cyclic behavior. Guillaume, do you have some ideas on some other parts of this?
No, I mean that's really what it is, right? Like this is, I think, this is really the exciting bit. Is kind of this huge scale and kind of sharing with the community. So I think on the engineering front, I think that's what I would really highlight. And then maybe we can talk a little bit about the different kinds of backgrounds and things like that, and the people working there as well.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what is Lyft, and how is Lyft being used at scale?
Right. So LIFT stands for the LinkedIn Fairness Toolkit. And it's something that we have open sourced last year, and it houses a lot of different metrics to measure fairness. Now, because we're working on such a variety of problems, right? We are working on the job space where we're trying to see how the job recommendations are behaving. We're working on newsfeed where we are trying to recommend different news articles for you. We are working on growing the network where different members are coming and connecting to you. So each of these product spaces are very different and very varied. And it's usually the case that not a single problem or not a single problem can be tackled with the same fairness metric. So what LIFT houses is a set of various different kind of fairness metrics that everybody can use to kind of understand or kind of get a feel of what their product is kind of behaving like. And that's not just it. So recently we started adding different kind of mitigation pipelines on LIFT as well. So let's say you do detect that some kind of bias in your system, we are actually giving you mitigation strategies that you can add on to your modeling behavior to kind of cure that bias if that has been found. And the overall thing that I want to stress on is that LIFT is built for scale. And scale is something that we are extremely proud of, and that's something that we focus on every single day. I think as iMini and DTK and so many other people have mentioned that we are working with more than 760 million approximately people or member in our platform, and building such systems for them requires a huge lot of effort. There are millions of Sparks and large-scale executors and big machines that are being put into place to drive such products in practice. And as a result, we need systems that can scale to such high degree. And LIFT basically is focusing on that. And I also want to add that it's not just LIFT that we are trying to open source. We have also open sourced a few ways of doing A/B experimentation. So Guillaume, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, we talked about intent and impact, right? And we always try to make sure that whatever we do, even though we have the best intentions, like has the right impact on people. And so, same here, LinkedIn is extremely experimentation driven. And so that's also what really attracted me to this company. It's data driven and kind of A/B testing driven. So we really try to make sure that what we do works. And it's very similar it's a very similar kind of space in terms of engineering, which is it's a lot of different experiments with hundreds of millions of members, and so it needs very, very large scale data analysis. And so how we try to figure out what is the impact, is there an equity impact, is there an inequality impact, is very interesting on the engineering front. And we've also open sourced our A/B testing libraries at very high scale to try to help people see whether their experiments have inequality impact or kind of positive kind of like deconcentration impact on opportunities. And so all of it, it's really kind of like interesting on the methodology, great in terms of the mission, and then this ability to go at like very large scale and open source. And so I think all of this makes it pretty interesting. Yeah.
Guillaume, I'd love to hear about, I know that one of the things that we talk a lot about internally is how data-driven we are in terms of decision-making and decisioning. So how are we approaching equity with data across the many disciplines that we're touching? Like what tools are we creating? What tools are we using? Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, sure. And that, that's also a thing that kind of surprised me actually when I first joined LinkedIn, because, I think engineers will probably recognize some of this, which is you go to school and you study something and you become pretty specialized. Right? And so you might be a statistician, economist, a computer scientist, what have you. You're kind of specialized. And when you get to LinkedIn, what you realize is that like other people have very, very different backgrounds than you. And you really get to learn a lot from that. And so equity is a great example. Because if you're thinking about equity, well, we have people, of course, right, who think about this from a machine learning perspective, which is, okay, there's an algorithm, algorithms have bias, so how do we think about that? We also have economists who think about what is discrimination? How do we measure discrimination? And there's a very long tradition in economics and in sociology about trying to measure and detect and understand discrimination. There's a series of causal inference questions, right? So if we do A, will B happen? How will people respond? What will happen? Like, is it, does it, are we effective? There's qualitative research, user research, trying to understand, what number of perceptions might be, and importantly, why, right? Why might people behave the way we observe? And so all of these things you kind of have to bring together. And so one of the tools that we built recently was actually kind of inspired by someone who's originally a discrimination economist. and kind of thought, well, I wonder if I can take what my field has to say about this stuff and kind of bring it to algorithms. And of course, we also talk to lawyers and ethicists. So there's this very kind of broad variety of disciplines, and it really also kind of expands your horizons when you come in and you're specialized. And of course, right, there's a fair bit of statistics as well. And so Kinjal is actually originally a statistician, so he can say something about that too.
Yeah, so being an original statistician, we have now converted into the realm of CS and focusing more on AI. Being able to measure significance is crucially important in this domain. Like, if we are testing for something, it's okay to see, okay, what's the overall effect? But it's very crucial to understand or be able to statistically detect whether this difference is actually meaningful or not. And that's why for various different kinds of tests or doing this kind of A/B testing that we are trying to do, it really, really matters to us whether we are able to detect something which is away from just random noise. So overall, all of these things that we are building together, ranging from causal inference, legal, policy, ethics, economics, etc., all of these things combined actually finally come together to give or to build the tools that empowers everything that we are doing.
That's amazing, because it really feels like when I hear the team talk, we really are infusing equity into the DNA of every aspect of what we're doing, because that's what's required for us to make a real impact. I love that. And so thank you both. I appreciate the conversation that we had, Guillaume and Kinjal. What I want to do now is, one, bring everybody back, because we promise you get more of DTK and Ada and Imani as well. But while we're pulling them back into our virtual stage, if you're looking to read more about the technical work that we've done, we have a variety of great blog posts. I can't be a comms guy without sending you to our blogs for more information and back to our website to get more information about all the amazing things that we're doing. If you want to get more information, go to blog.linkedin.com. Again, that is blog.linkedin.com for much more about some of this incredible technical work that we've been doing. We've gotten a glimpse of what happens within each organization, and let's just have some fun now. And everybody, come on back into the virtual room. I'm going to ask a few questions. Imani, we started off with you in the beginning. I'm going to start off with you again this time. Now that we heard from folks on product and engineering, I'm wondering if you could bring some color to the big picture, right? How does all of this work cascade into your role? And if you're not on the immediate equity strategy team at LinkedIn, will you feel the impact of equity work day to day? Help us all kind of get a feel for where we are at this journey right now.
Yes, we should all feel the impact. We are, as a company, about 16,000 strong around the globe, and this is absolutely a company-wide commitment. We have a number of work. We have work we do across the company, and we have this concept of having things that are shared responsibility, which means what we're trying to do in the space is bigger than any one team. What I really try and focus the central kind of core strategy team on is identifying what our priorities are, making sure we are unblocked. And then here's one of the most important things, to make sure that everyone feels like they can act like an owner. So Peter talked a little bit about one of our company values, which is this idea of acting like an owner, which is how are we actually empowering every member on our team, whether you're in product, whether you're in engineering, whether you're in legal, whether you're in marketing and communications, right? This is something that we all have an opportunity to have impact on, because it's about all of us, right? Equity is about all of us, not any one team, not anyone. And so one of the things that we try to do during the process of kind of cascading out is, how do we give teams in the company a set of guiding principles so that as they're out doing equity work, regardless of what team they're on, they are making sure that they're laddering up to our broader equity strategy, and that the impact they are making can be carried forward and can ladder up to our overall goals and objectives. So absolutely everyone should feel the impact, because it is a shared responsibility, and one of our core values is acting like an owner. But it doesn't stop there. I want to reiterate something that Kinjal and Guillaume talked about, which is we're also trying to create spaces where other companies and other teams can help deliver on some of the equity goals that they may have set for themselves. So when you think about open sourcing some of our work that they talked about, our fairness AI tools, and some of our open sourcing work around how you can better do A/B testing, like we are seeking to not just empower our workforce, but candidly empower the role and other teams in helping to move forward broader equity goals.
I love that. I mean, I am by no means an engineer. I'm a words guy, not a science and numbers guy. And the equity work that we're doing at LinkedIn was one of the reasons why I wanted to come here. And I'm a marketing and communications person, and I get a chance to touch equity in a very meaningful way, I hope, every day. And I honestly think it's going to be some of the most meaningful work of my career is what we're doing here at LinkedIn right now around equity and equitable outcomes. Ada, how have your experiences in work in general shaped how you approach this work that you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I've actually held a variety of jobs throughout my career, from being a waitress to working in NASA, from coaching basketball to being a product manager here at LinkedIn. And like Imani said, equity is about all of us, because what I've learned throughout all these different experiences is even though it's called work, it's really all about the people. And one of our company values at LinkedIn here is relationships matter. And that continues to ring true for me and has really shaped how I approach work, my team, and even this project. So for example, I realize that every person has their own style. And so when I evaluate performance or I think about hiring, I try to be very intentional about separating out the style from the substance. And other example, I know that every person has their own superpowers, right? So I look for ways to amplify their unique superpowers so they can reach their full potential. And most of all, I know that every person is going through their own challenges and struggles, and some are more visible than others. So whatever it is that they're going through, I just want to be there to support them the best that I can. And so equity is about all of us, and my approach to work through my experiences is to put people first.
I love that. Guillaume, what about you? Why is it personal for you, and how have your experiences kind of shaped how you approach this work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think, what makes it really, so one thing that I've experienced at LinkedIn that really changed the way I think about this is really, I think I've learned a bit more to question my assumptions. And it started I was working on this project and I was writing this model and making these assumptions that somehow people were substitutable. That if you didn't send a message to this person, you'd send a message to another person. And I was working, it turns out, on this project with someone who was a psychologist by training. And when I said that, he looked at me and he said, "You really sure that you can assume that people are substitutable?" And I wasn't thinking, I was just writing this model. And I think this happened a couple of times from this just great diversity of thought that we have here, right? And it just made me pause and think, okay, maybe I really need to double check my assumptions before I start kind of doing this work. And I think that's something that's extremely valuable, because we all make our assumptions. And having that experience, I think, pretty early after joining LinkedIn, kind of really, I think, shaped how I approach this work now, this methodology work around equity.
I love that. One of the beauties about LinkedIn is the other people you get to work with every day, and I see that every day when people challenge my assumptions and give me a new perspective to think about based on their diverse background or experience as well. So I love that, because that is definitely my experience every day. Kinjal, what have you accomplished at LinkedIn that you are most proud of? Give us a specific story.
Yeah, okay. So on that, I can talk something that I'm being proud of, or something that I did very recently that I'm very happy that it actually worked out. So LinkedIn has this ideology of keeping members first, right? So that's something that we value in everything that we are doing. And if you think about it, members give us their data. So that is some of the cherished treasure that we actually have. Now, when you're looking at any of the things that we are building for Project Equity, biggest things being the measurement and the mitigation pipelines, they require access to such protected or private data. So when we're actually thinking about how do we integrate Lyft into our own internal pipeline, the question came up very often is that, hey, do we need to give the data that our members have given a broad access? And the answer to that is obviously no. We want to keep it as private and as secure as possible. But at the same time, we actually also want to make sure that every AI modeler, or anybody who wants to evaluate their system, should be given access to at least see the results of what they are doing. So in order to do such a thing, right, in order to make this secure system or make this integration happen, we actually built out a very nice or a very complex service that can do this system where, as an engineer, even if I do not have access to your protected data, I should be able to evaluate how good my model is. I should be able to evaluate whether I'm being biased or not. And that does not require me to understand whether you have a particular attribute or not, right? So being able to build the system from scratch and actually add that to every vertical flow that we have. So at LinkedIn, we have close to more than 100 to 200 different kind of pipelines that are powering different kind of products all across. And each of them have this system inbuilt into them that if you're building it, will give you the results for free. Now, making that through the system, and I can honestly say that that's been one of the proudest moments for me so far.
I love that. I love that. DTK, can you give us a sneak peek of any upcoming inclusive product features that might be in the works? Anything that you can kind of give us a peek behind the curtain on?
Yes, definitely. And Kinjal, it's incredible. I love hearing the teammates talk about the work that they're doing. So one, we have a really long roadmap that we're working on for equity. So I hope that you guys can continue to follow our journey as we continue to share this openly with the world. Two particular things that I will call out. One is profile anonymization, which Ada mentioned earlier. We're working on a second iteration of that, where we're thinking about hiding additional dimensions of somebody's profile. So when a recruiter's looking at it, we can remove the implicit bias that some people have for graduation years, potentially for school, and even location. So excited for that iteration of the profile anonymization. And then second, we're thinking about the network gap. So the idea that networks play a massive role in people connecting to opportunity, whether that's building your voice on LinkedIn, connecting to a job opportunity, potentially starting a business. And so how do we help members build their networks as well as think about diversifying their networks? And so we're in the early brainstorms for ideas that we're going to be tackling in the next couple of quarters.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, everybody. Before we wrap up, what I'd love for us to do is we're going to do sort of a round robin where each one of us is going to talk about why equity is personal to us. And I'm going to start, and I'm going to say that equity is personal to me because I am Black, I'm gay, I grew up on a dirt road in Mississippi, and I'm brilliant, right? And so for all of the people out there who are other or are different, who are not fitting in the majority, I am so excited about equity because I want all of those folks to have the same opportunities as everyone else, right? With talent is truly equally distributed, opportunity and outcomes should be key. And I want that for other people who, quite honestly, look like me. We started off with Imani. Let's go to Imani next.
I thought you were going to say, let's reverse the direction. But I'm happy to go next, Drew. So why is equity important and personal to me? I think there's a number of reasons, but the way I'll actually say it is, I'm very aware that I live in a world in today's age where it is unexpected for me to have the experiences I've had in life, to have the relative successes and accomplishments, however you define them. Everyone defines them differently. That I've had in life, and it bothers me that that in many ways I'm an exception, instead of just kind of the standard to things. I will also say that I also realized I had come from a tremendous place of privilege. I was born healthy, have a tremendous family, I work at a tremendous company, get to work with Drew, and Ada, and Guillaume, and Kendra, DTK, who are all amazing and phenomenal at what they do. I don't know what, I can't even name something that supersedes their passion for this work, and I get to work alongside them. And it bothers me that this is not the case for everyone. Everyone should have the same amount of privilege, and everyone should have the same amount of experiences. And it shouldn't be a surprise when anyone has a certain amount of experiences or accomplishment or successes. And so that's why, for me, this is beyond just work. This is very, very personal for those reasons. It doesn't feel right that I can't look to my left and right and everywhere I go and everyone has the same experience or at least has the same opportunity for experiences. So that's how I'll explain it. But definitely something that's important to me for those reasons.
I love it. Ada, what about you?
So for me, I moved to the United States when I was 8. So at 8, I was made fun of simply for being Asian. At 10, I remember a boy told me to stop being bossy. And at 18, a classmate told me that I probably only got accepted to my university to meet the female quota. And so these moments and countless moments like these really shook my confidence and my identity. And now, as a mother, I don't want my daughter, or any child for that matter, to feel less than simply for being born a certain way. So I want to do my part in creating the future that I want to see for them and for all the children, right? One where we celebrate differences, amplify superpowers, and also create equitable outcomes and opportunities for everyone.
Awesome. What about you, Guillaume?
I mean, for me, I think it's really just something that I've wondered about ever since I was very young, which is, I think, I used to go to school and used to get on the bus coming back to school, and you just see these insane differences, which is some people who live very well and some people who have nothing, and you just wonder why, right? Like, why is this happening? Like, why are there so many differences, so many inequalities? And so for me, this was also, trying to understand this. And as I looked into this more and more, I realized that a lot of it was pretty unfair. But a lot of it was actually the result of things that probably shouldn't be, right? And so it just became this, this thing that I just couldn't ignore. I just seemed to see it everywhere, and from hearing experiences in my family and my friends, and it just became something that I had to get to the bottom of, basically, and try to do whatever I could, in my however I could contribute, essentially try to do something. Yeah.
Awesome. What about you, DTK?
Yeah, for me, I guess I come from a family with a lot of privilege. Like, I grew up with a lot of opportunities. I'm white and I'm male, and that comes with a lot of both privilege and overrepresentation. And I think it's really important that this work of equity is not just done by a small group. It's actually the work that we all need to do to create sort of inclusive experiences. And I see that show up in the professional world. I see that show up in the personal world as well. Like, two of my siblings identify as part of the LGBT community. I do as well. And I think it's been challenging having potentially, parents that aren't fully accepting. And so I've seen that have the sort of personal impact. And I think at LinkedIn, we really think about bringing your full self to work. And for that to be a reality for every member of the global workforce, we have a lot of work to do to make sure that people are thinking about building inclusive experiences so that everyone can thrive and achieve economic opportunity.
I love that. What about you, Kinjal?
Yeah, so for me, it's also something very similar to what I think both Guillaume and DTK mentioned, right? So I come from a very privileged family, and I grew up in India. But if you just keep your eye open, it's very obvious to see the huge discrepancy or disparity that exists in society. So when I moved to the US for the grad school, and we started developing models, and we tried to understand or try to predict so much behavior. And now it has come to a stage where almost every human behavior, there is somewhere, something, a machine that is trying to determine what you should see, where you should apply, where you should eat, what movies you should watch. And every aspect of things are kind of getting determined by such systems that we are building from scratch. And now having this opportunity to actually mend the situation, to try to do things in a better way that can actually improve it, I think that's what rings the bell for me.
Thank you all. Thank you for your candor. Thank you for your intelligence and your brilliance on these incredible topics. We're super excited to have brought all of this great group together. And I think if nothing else, the number one thing that we can all take away from this is that we can only be successful with this if we have everyone as a part of the solution. We can't grow, innovate, or influence the world around us without everyone doing their part. So what I say to you, if you're watching this, is join us on this journey. There's so many ways that you can help, and there's some ways that you can do that starting right now. The first one, as Amini and DTK mentioned, this is to self-ID. This critical step in deepening our understanding of who's using our products, and it truly allows us to identify, understand, and drive towards equitable outcomes for everyone using our platform. So when you choose to share your demographic information in our settings, first of all, just so you know, it won't be visible on your profile or used to identify you to other members, to recruiters, or companies without your explicit consent. That's really important, so I'll say it again. When you choose to share your demographic information in your settings, it will not be visible on your profile, and it won't be used to identify you to other members, to recruiters, or to companies without your explicit consent. Another way you can do this is that you can join our Conversations for Change. We'd love to fuel that. We'd love for you to help us fuel this conversation. So feel free to post about your experience here today and what your favorite moment was using the hashtag Pathways to Equity. Again, tell us how you feel about what you heard today. Hashtag Pathways to Equity. Third, transparency and accountability are critical components of this journey, and they're values that we're incredibly committed to. So lastly, if you're interested in learning more about how you can contribute to this meaningful work here at LinkedIn, if you want to provide feedback or are simply excited about our Pathways to Equity, want to share your thoughts, there is a QR code you can click here, which will direct you to a quick survey. So, before I send you all off, I want to take a moment once again just to thank all of our speakers and thank you for being here today. What you've heard today is just a fraction of the hard work that we're going to be doing to address bias wherever it lives on our platform and to help drive more equitable outcomes on LinkedIn and at companies around the world. So I hope you feel empowered, I hope you feel motivated, and I hope that you'll help us change the world. When we do that, and your help, we can create equal access to opportunity, but not just that, but we can create equitable outcomes for the entire workforce. And that's the mission that we're driving towards, helping to facilitate every single day. With that, thank you for joining me this evening. Good evening and good night. Have a great one.